Today we will speak about theories of social identity. First approach is realistic interest approach. Common idea of this approach is that group membership translates into political cohesion, then group members have tangible interest in common. Realistic group theory emphasizes protection of self and group interests. It argues that intergroup bias and intergroup discrimination follow from the attempt to realize or preserve group interests, especially when these interests are incompatible with those of other groups. Relative deprivation theory describes the perception that lead to conflict. People believe that their group finances and positions are less positive in comparison with outgroups. Theories of personal social identity analyze social identity as part of individual self-conception, as a part of self which has been influenced by membership in specific social group or category, and shared behavior and socialization. According to theories, people internalize their belonging to group and perceive it as a part of their personality. For example, who I am as X. Theories of role social identities stress the importance of structure of social system. This system includes functional roles, status position, and interrelations between them. Social groups are analyzed as a set of individuals who interact by accepting different interconnected roles. Individuals have different social identities depending on their roles and position within the group. Social identities are considered as internalized rules, expectations, and norms connected with particular rules. By accepting social role, person put himself or herself in specific position in relations to others and social system as a whole. Role identities are interconnected because the behavior of one person influences and depends on behavior of others. Every role, even stable and fixed, has to be taken into account, and features, needs, and skills of other people influence this particular role. The development of social identity theory was based on the methodology of minimal group paradigm. It creates a minimal intergroup conditions to study discrimination between groups. In the first phase, participants are randomly and anonymously divided into two groups, for example based on the test that defines preferences for paintings of Kandinsky or Klee. Participants never meet members of a group and never saw them. In the second phase, participants are asked to distribute payments between in-group and out-group. For example, they can have several options presented in this table. Each option gives in-group the same amount of money, but the payment to out-group varies. What options do you think is used most often? Option A and B. Participants show a significant tendency to allocate more money or points to in-group members than to out-group members. Why it's happening? Social identity theory provides the following explanation. People award more points to their own group than to the out-group because of in-group favoritism that helps them feel better about themselves and achieve positive distinctiveness. Social identity theory states that social category constitutes an element of self-concept. Categorization is described as a basic cognitive process. It clarifies intergroup boundaries by producing group stereotypical and normative perceptions and actions. This category is presented in our minds as social identity. The beliefs about nature of relations between in-groups and out-groups are constituted by subjective belief structures. Social identity both describes and prescribes attitudes of people as group members. Social identity is also evaluative, and group members favorably compare in-group with out-groups. theory emphasizes a need for positive self-esteem as a basic need that leads to favorable comparison, in which in-group are viewed more positively than out-groups. Positive social identity can be achieved through intergroup comparison and negative assessment of out-groups. Prejudice and discrimination often rest on perception that members of out-groups have more advantages in matters of power and resources. These perceptions of relative deprivation, real or imagined, strongly contribute to the development of intergroup conflict. How in-group perceptions impact the person's views on social groups, society, and worlds? The acceptance of intergroup norms, beliefs, and values as his own by a group member rests on several mechanisms. First, a person accepts in-group perceptions because achievements and social position of particular group provide a positive self-esteem for its members. Second, people can acquire in-group view on the world because they believe in membership of this group and feel loyalty and positive connections to its members. Third, a person can accept in-group norms and values through participation in social practices of particular group. Fourth, a person can internalize social norms and standards by playing different social roles specific to the in-group. Fifth, acceptance of in-group values and beliefs rests on belonging to particular cultures. And finally, a person acquires in-group perception based on the primacy of in-group over others. Social categorization theory explains group-level processes in terms of functions of self-concept. It also assumes that group processes influence self-categorization and cognition. Self-categories are cognitive grouping of self. Personal and social identity are two levels of self-categorization. Personal identity refers to self-categories that define individuals as unique person and stress his or her individual differences from others. Social identity refers to social categorization of self and others, self-categories that define individuals in terms of his or her membership in group and similarities with in-group members. It also stresses contrast to other social categories. The stronger social identity, the more depersonalized become a person. Prototype is subjective representation of the defining attributes, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors of social category. But prototypes are not checklists of attributes or ideal types. Instead, they are actual people who represent the most important attributes of particular group, including its beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. The group prototype also serves an emotional function. Positive attitudes towards the prototype unite group and at the same time facilitate the development of negative perceptions of members of outgroups who differ from this in-group prototype. Thus, prototype defines social attraction. Less prototypical members will be liked less than more prototypical members. Prototypes are also usually served as group leaders. How social categories function? The principle of meta-conscious states that differences within categories are smaller than differences between categories. For example, apples can have different color, size, and shapes. Oranges also can be different in color and size. So sometimes orange and apple could be very similar and look the same. But if I will ask you to put them in two groups, you will put all apples in one group and all oranges in another group. Thus, you will use categories of apples and oranges and will see the differences between them as more important than differences within each group. Similarly, you will see that all members of one ethnic group are similar to each other and different from representatives of another ethnic group. Social categories also should be accessible. You have to know about a particular category to be able to use it. For example, you need to know about libertarian in order to apply this category in a particular social context. And of course, social category should fit a particular situation. It should represent our normative beliefs and theories about social meaning. Social identity can be analyzed as a product of the process of boundary formation between social groups. It forms along this boundary and therefore defined by the relationship between them and us. Tilly stresses that social identity centers on boundaries separating us from them. On each side of the boundary, people sustain ongoing relations within the in-group. In addition, they also develop interrelations between their groups across the boundary line. According to Tilly, there are three key elements of social boundary. They include distinctive social relations on either side of the boundary, distinctive relations across the boundary, and shared representation of the boundary. The existence of this intergroup boundary and the relationship among groups and outgroups are reflected in the narratives of both groups and create the basis for their collective identities. Tilly describes mechanisms of boundary change, which he calls boundary imposition and boundary activation. Tilly shows that imposition, the drawing of a new, previously non-existent border, led to expulsion and extermination in these cases. Tilly further stresses that political boundaries themselves are usually created to help defend insiders from perceived threat from outsiders. Political leaders and governments often support such boundaries of their transformation, which leads to even stronger political exclusion. Thus, during this week, you learn about theories of social identity, which you will apply in your writing during this week.